was at the Labour Party conference, and their message to me was striking, which was that they believe that we are closer to that kind of 10 minutes to midnight than we've ever been before in that part of the world.
Let's begin with, well, we should just mention what's happening in the Middle East. I mean, the government, of course, their position would be that the British nationals need to evacuate Lebanon. They will just be watching this very closely because there is this sense this could just escalate into a full-blown regional conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm slightly confused by the government's position in that basically at the moment we're sitting on the sidelines of this conflict. We're very clear that we want to find a diplomatic solution to this, and yet Netanyahu has made it clear that he's not going to stop, that he is now, determined to finish the job off effectively. And, the timing of this is all quite interesting. We're going to have the anniversary of the October 7th attacks next week. And so it is a moment where there is particularly heightened emotions around what is going on. And I think a sense that, this is the moment that they've got to kind of go in and finish what they started. It seems at the moment that getting people out is very much reliant on the commercial airlines to get them out. But actually, if you look, and I have looked, to see how easy it is to get out of Lebanon at the moment, it's really difficult. There are no flights this weekend. I couldn't book on a single flight back from Beirut to London. The first flights that appear to be available, and this was yesterday when I checked, was Wednesday. That was going to cost me £2,000 to get out via Dubai. And yet we know that there is a kind of moment of great peril here. The airstrikes are intensifying. The airport is open. There be for the grace of God that it remains open, because obviously it's very difficult flying into that part of the world when you don't know when the next airstrike is going to come. And the alternative to that, of course, is to get people out by sea, which has happened before, but is a much more complicated scenario than getting them out by air. And of course, that's why we know that there are warships stationed off the coast of Cyprus at the moment, ready to help with that evacuation if they need to. But it will be something that the government are watching incredibly carefully. I spoke to a senior government minister last week when I was at the Labour Party conference, and their message to me was striking, which was that they believe that we are closer to that kind of 10 minutes to midnight than we've ever been before in that part of the world. And given the kind of strife and struggle and conflict that we've seen there in the past, that's quite some statement.
Obviously, we will continue the analysis of events in the Middle East throughout the day and over the weekend here on Times Radio. And if you head to thetimes.com, you can read the latest up-to-the-minute analysis. Caroline, you mentioned Labour conference. Was it good? Good week?
Not the week I was expecting. I think that we were all expecting to be going to Liverpool for a bit of a jamboree, a bit of a celebration. The first Labour Party conference in 14 years where the party was in power. And actually the mood was pretty subdued. Whilst there were people out singing karaoke, as there always is, and obviously a bit of a kind of party mood. When you spoke to key members of the government, they were pretty angry, actually, that it felt like this great opportunity that they had been handed on July the 4th with that landslide victory was being squandered pretty quickly, and the goodwill towards the government was being, eaten up by scandals that were emerging, in an astonishingly rapid series of developments.
Well, it's this kind of, some people call it the free gear Kia row. And I think initially a lot of people in Downing Street probably hoped it would kind of die down quite quickly. Doesn't appear to be the case. I mean, now we've got reports that the PM received another £16,000 worth of clothes from Lord Ali, declared as money for his private office initially. I mean, are they worried that there is even more to come, maybe? And do they worry that this is causing lasting damage?
The thing is that I worry is that they're not worried enough about that,
really?
Actually.
Yeah.
We know that last Friday they came out with a statement to say that they weren't going to take these free clothes any longer. That was done in a very deliberate effort to try and draw a line under this particular saga. It seems that has not happened. I know internally there was an audit done. All cabinet ministers were approached. They were asked, have you taken any free gear? If you have done, has it been declared correctly? And where it hadn't, such as in the case of Rachel Reeves, she she clarified her position, made it clear that she had accepted some clothes from a different donor, actually, not from Wahid Ali. But the whole kind of sentiment behind it was that they hope to be able to move on from this. And, if I were running the show, I'd be pretty cross that if I'd asked people to come forward and kind of bring out their dead at that particular point so that we could try and put it behind us, and that didn't happen, and it seemed that there were fresh revelations to come. It's not a great look for the party.
And it's interesting you say that maybe some people are concerned that Downing Street isn't worried enough. Do you think there is a fair chance things could get worse and that Keir Starmer could be in for a difficult few weeks?
Yeah. I mean, I have been astonished, genuinely astonished by the way in which they have handled this particular crisis. I think there is a sense that among them that they are sort of doing God's work and that somehow they're above the kind of the optics of all of this. They will say, as Boris Johnson did, that they have stuck to the rules and that they haven't done anything wrong. But that negates the fact that a lot of this just doesn't smell very nice.
It's the smell test. I remember David Cameron saying during the expenses scandal in 2009, he said to his MPs, I don't care if what you did was within the letter of the rules. It's how it looks. And if it looks bad, you need to pay the money back.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's my kind of fear, is that whilst this has all been quite uncomfortable for them, they've adopted quite a sort of defensive approach towards it, almost trying to defend something. But I think if you went down and spoke to punters, in the pub about what they thought about this, they would all almost universally say that it's unacceptable. If somebody gives you something for free and you hold a position of power, there is always going to be a question mark about what they want in return. That is called corruption.
Let's come on to Tory conference. It's interesting you say that, if we'd been sitting here at the start of July after the election and we said, what's the mood going to be at Labour conference? We'd have said, it'll be, as you say, a bit of a jamboree. And in the end, it turned out differently. And had you said, what will the mood be at Tory conference? You'd probably say, it'll be like a wake. Will it be like a wake this week, or will it be a bit more interesting than that?
I think that the fact that the Labour Party has found itself struggling so quickly after they came to power, look, we're not even 100 days in yet, will breathe some fresh life into the Conservative Party. There will be a kind of sense of renewal, that perhaps the victory is not as damaging as it might have been. When you looked at those results on July the 4th or the morning of July the 5th, you would have looked at it and thought, this is definitely 2 terms, at the very least, of Labour in government. I think a lot of the leadership candidates will now be looking at it and thinking, well, actually, there's a chance that we could turn this round if we can sort the party out, do what Labour did actually in one term, which was to change the party, reposition itself. Then there is a possibility that they may have a shot when we have the next election. And I think that will give them some optimism where perhaps a few days after the election there wouldn't have been any.
That is a fascinating point, because my general sense of things is, if you look at the history of the past 40 years or so, generally speaking, the British public go, OK, we'll put this lot in for a fair crack of the whip. We had 18 years of Conservative government between 79 and 97, then 13 years of Labour, then 14 years of the Tory. And maybe some in Downing Street are working on the assumption they will get an equivalent length of time in power. And yet, if you look all around the world, political tides come in and out quicker than ever. So it could well be that this is a one-term government, potentially.
Absolutely. My sense is that things just happen faster now. Everything seems to happen faster. You could have predicted that Labour would have a kind of honeymoon period, that there would be some bumps in the road. But I think we were all expecting that to happen after about 18 months, 2 years. The fact that it happened, within sort of 6 weeks of this government getting into power has, I think, surprised many of us. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the winds of change and the fact that we all consume information in such a different way to the way that we used to. And, some of those tribal loyalties were broken down because of Brexit, that changed the way that people vote. I think people are much more likely to change from election to election. It does mean that, it's much more volatile, and the chances that we're going to see different successive governments, I think, has increased exponentially.
All 4 of the remaining Tory leadership contenders are going to speak at conference this week. Who needs to have the best week? Who really needs to kind of put a marker down?
It's a really good question, because they all do to a certain extent. Within 2 weeks' time, this could all be over for them once we get down to those sort of final eliminations. The sort of the feeling that I get is that Jenrick is over the line. I think he's done enough to get most of the MPs that he needs on side. What he'll be thinking about now is who he wants to stop getting into that final two. And from everything that I'm hearing, the plan is to try and stop Kemi Badenoch from getting into the final two, because she would be seen as the most dangerous threat to him when it comes to garnering the support of the grassroots members. So I think it's all on Kemi at the moment to try and persuade her MP colleagues that she should be the one that goes through to the final two with Robert Jenrick.
But then you could get a situation, which has happened before, where notional supporters of Robert Jenrick lend their votes to other candidates to try and engineer a showdown in the final two that is favourable to him.
And I think that's what people think is going to happen. I mean, I think the kind of the safe money seems to be on some sort of notion that he has done that. If you look at his numbers, which have kind of gradually crept up, but at the same time, the numbers of his opponents have changed. I think there has been some feeling that he might be trying to inflate James Cleverly's figures in order to avoid Kemi getting into the final two. That's not actually, not without danger for him, actually, because if you look at some of the polling that's been done over the time, James has been a popular figure, particularly amongst the public. But if you do look at those Conservative grassroots members, it does seem to be that the more right-wing candidates tend to win greater favour.